everybody. Welcome to the Universal Church of Truth, Moon Knight, episode 3, episode The Friendly Type episode. I'm one half of your host, Hunter, and this is the other half of your host,
Mary.
We nailed it. That's the first time I think that we've completely nailed that. Um, Great. Mary, we're gonna start with you. What are your overall thoughts on the third episode of Marvel Studios' Moon Knight?
Well, I just rewatched it again, like right before this, but I've probably seen that one for some reason. That one like 8 times. I don't know why, through all the articles and stuff. But yeah, there's stuff I forget from it, so which is kind of funny. So I have a problem with this one. And I like it. I should start that way. I have a problem with this one in terms of like we have seen the fourth and the second. Obviously, it kind of runs together with a lot of those, so it's almost like a weird, not placeholder by any means, but it doesn't stand out to me as much as ones do because of that. But it does have a lot going on, and I think it sets up a pretty interesting plot with the Egyptian lore and whatnot. But I remember the first time I watched it, I kind of got lost. And maybe I was taking too many notes or something, but I was like, okay, so why are they at the sarcophagus? Why does this guy have it? What are they doing? Where are they going? And now, like, I know, but I don't know if anyone else had that problem the first time. Maybe.
No, it's actually funny you bring that up because I had the active thought when I was rewatching it this time. There were so many things in this episode that I know I saw the first time I watched it, but maybe just didn't register. And I think it's funny that you specifically brought up like the whole sequence where they go and look for the tomb, and it's like a whole thing. I also, the first time I watched this, I wasn't sure why they were there. And this time they mentioned like a Senfu character. I was like, I don't remember them talking about Senfu the first time at all, which is, it was obviously there. It was maybe just my fault as a viewer, but you're right. This is maybe the most like jam-packed episode that we have so far, which is why, dear listener, I did actively take notes this time around as opposed to the first two episodes because I was like, I'm gonna need something to help with this. Um, so, I mean, speaking it, let's just hop right into the middle of this episode, and then we can go back to the beginning, back to the end. But I think there's a few big ticket items in this, but one of them is the whole sequence with Anton Mogart, um, antiquities collector, and back to the air quotes that we love to use here. Antiquities collector, and in the comics, a villain known as Midnight Man. Um, I think there's gonna be a lot of people who watch this episode and think, oh, well, we were promised that this actor was gonna be playing this like classic Moon Knight villain. Like, where was it? That wasn't even what he was. But then I went and I looked into it a little bit more, and it turns out he's actually not that far off from what the comic book character is. They just kind of didn't do the whole like vigilante like suit aspect of him. So, Moon Knight comic book expert Mary, please explain to the good folks who Midnight Man is and what you think of this adaptation.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you know plenty about it too, maybe more than me. I mean, he's a classic villain, but he's not like around quite a ton. Like he's not in
No.
like all these different comics. But yeah, I mean, he was kind of originally this corny thief of like really nice things. I struck at midnight. That's why he's a Midnight Man. He had the whole costume. But he would steal like jewels and art and stuff, and he'd keep them all. He wouldn't sell them. It's kind of his thing. Is he just wanted to own them? He didn't care about the money.
Right.
So, and that's I think a lot of where I saw some of the similarities with the live action version. But in the comics, early on, like after his first like appearance, he like seems to die, doesn't. He just kind of goes insane, and his face is disfigured, and joins up with another villain for like a hot second, and then almost dies again, doesn't, and then shows up like years later, and he has a son. So he's a classic villain, but he's not like doesn't have the craziest amount of storyline. But in
Right.
terms of what we saw, we definitely saw some of the personality of it rather than the kind of costume vigilante thief.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I did a quick little refresher on the character, just because I knew that we were going to talk about it, and I knew that people would probably want us to talk about it. And yeah, he pretty much summed it up. It seems like he's had maybe like three major like arcs or appearances in the comics. Like his original appearance, where he's just like you said, a guy who really likes to steal art and like historical antiquities and stuff, and he just likes to own it, and he strikes at night, so he calls himself Midnight Man. And that's pretty much what we see in the show. Is he's a guy who really likes to own things for the sake of owning them. They don't say that he steals stuff in the middle of the night, but I mean, I guess the whole sequence takes place at night, so maybe that was like a fun little thing. I don't really know. Um, and he comes back. He does come back eventually with Bushman, who is traditionally Moon Knight's like arch nemesis, as people say. But I mean, I think as we've mentioned a few times with this show, Moon Knight, in terms of like classic villains, it's not like Moon Knight has this super iconic rogue gallery that they have to adapt into this show. So really, most of his villains, when you bring them in, are going to be characters who showed up like three times in the comics and then disappeared, and that's going to give them a lot of leeway with adapting stuff. But they do. I mean, they do end it with him like supposedly maybe dying, but they don't really give it a lot of clarity. So like he could come back, although the actor has unfortunately passed away. So if he, maybe they don't now if they had planned on it, or maybe I don't know if they'll recast. That's a whole other thing. But I thought he was fun. I thought he was like a fun little like one episode antagonist.
Yeah.
I thought,
I mean, there was so much, and honestly, I was one of those things I didn't either remember or pick up on until this last time I watched it just a second ago. And there's so much conversation between him and Layla about whatever happened in Madripoor and that
right.
MCU connection, like the two things I mentioned, that and the GRC, I think. It's like it. But there's so many like there's like don't talk to me about trust. So like just random shit like that. And it's like from the way it seems to end in episode 3, it doesn't seem like he's coming back anytime soon to have those kind of conversations, like that. I don't personally want that. There's a lot more going on, but like there's so much
You're
going on
right.
in the background there. It's like, are they ever going to explore that? Maybe with her more so than him, but there was a lot packed into that. Maybe they originally had it in there more, maybe not. I don't know. But there was a lot of just like implied conversation.
Yeah. I mean there's that sequence. Quick side note is really cool. I think in the 4 episodes, it's that like action sequence, the trademark 5 minutes of Moon Knight that we get per episode. This action scene was really good. I did really like it. It gave me a good like chuckle when he was standing there and then they like cut away from him and they cut back and he was already on top of the pyramid in his suit. I just pictured him like scrambling up there as fast as he could and his little like um yeah, I thought that was like appropriately corny. I like that. The whole action scene was really good. We'll get into that in a second, but I'm glad you brought up Layla because I did have a few notes in reference to her, especially what you said. I have a note that says simply Madripoor reference, which I think was just me really wanting to bring up the like one of the first wider MCU references the show has given us was just the quick like, hey, Layla was active in Madripoor, one off. Um, and I wrote down the note, Layla's name pisses off people in Cairo. And I also wrote down the note, Layla's father, because Anton mentions that.
Yeah,
So if you would like to talk about that, I think that this kind of starts to dip back into last week where we were hypothetically throwing out there, however that word works, that Layla might be some sort of updated version of the existing comic book character Marlene.
for sure. Well, so in that scene, her father gets mentioned, but at the very beginning of the episode, when she's like getting, I guess, the fake passport or whatever, uh,
Right.
that woman, family friend, I'm not exactly sure, mentions her father too, mentions that her father was killed. And there's like a vague mention that like whatever happened in the sands is like erased by the scene. So she doesn't know what happened really to her father, but she knows he's dead, which is interesting because Marlene is there in virtually every iteration of Moon Knight's origin story of that. So I think it's interesting. And it's kind of setting up because Harrow, which I also keep forgetting, he shows up to that
Yeah.
Bogart's whole area just randomly too. He's been
I love that about Harrow, that he's always there. Like somehow he's always there.
I just
Like
show
he just pops up all the time.
yeah, and he tells her like, oh, he's not telling you the truth about it. That implies that it's kind of more that classic. He was
Yeah.
there and slightly involved with that. So I think it is probably we're going to go down a similar path with her backstory with that, and her dad being kind of a key player and where and when Mark became Moon Knight. But it is interesting that she was not there because I haven't seen that. Like there are sometimes when he's under the statue and she's not there with him under the statue, like in Lemire's run. But like classically, she was, and it's like how they met. So it's yeah. So it's kind of interesting how they meet. I don't know. They met in the series.
Yeah, there's just a lot of talk about Layla having this like really intense background. I mean I don't know. Based on, we see her that she's very capable fighter, and obviously capable of handling herself, and maybe she was a mercenary just like Mark at some point. Maybe, I mean, if not that, she kind of hints that she's got like an Indiana Jones thing, like Nathan Drake, Lara Croft thing going on, where she's like, they're like, ah, you're still stealing or whatever, and she's like, I don't steal. Like the things I find are already stolen, and I'm just giving them back. And sometimes I keep them for myself if I need the money. And I thought that was really fun. But yeah, so in that whole fight sequence, I know that you had talked about last week that you really like this show's version of Mr. Knight, and Mr. Knight got one great. I listen. I love it. I thought it was really really funny. And then later in the episode, he gets a whole other thing. But I was thinking about how we were talking last week that this show seems to be taking that route from the comics of Mr. Knight being like the Moon Knight who is more of a talker than a fighter. Um, and that's straight up what happens in that sequence. Is like Mark turns into Moon Knight. He starts like just kicking butt, and it's really cool and it's really exciting, and he's got the flow going. And then Steven is like, I'm gonna take over, like don't hurt these people, and then he takes over, and then like he's like, let's just don't talk about it. And it's just I loved that because it felt exactly like, you know, that Mr. Knight persona that we were talking about last week. And then he immediately gets impaled multiple times. It's like, take the body, take the body, take the body. And then yeah, I just, that whole sequence was so good. I did genuinely laugh. I thought, you know, Oscar Isaac is just so good in this show.
So good.
Um, in general.
Just thinking, watching it, like I kind of take some of it for granted, but I'm like, wait a minute, like I have no problem believing that these are two different people, like
Yeah.
whether it's a mirror or whatever. Like he can just do that, and I think normally for most actors, even if they're good at it, it's still okay. It's Oscar Isaac doing things, but it's like two characters. Like I really, he's great.
Yeah.
Just
I mean, it's like, I think I mentioned this in the when we talked about the first episode, but there's like that classic Superman thing where like it's Christopher Reeve like has the glasses and he's like kind of hunched over, he takes it off and he stands up, and it's just like this brilliant bit of acting where you can see how he's playing two different people with the same body. And Oscar Isaac has another scene like that, like kind of later in the episode when they're trying to figure out the stars, and he's like, "All right, like you got it." And then Steven comes in, he's like, "All right, cheers, thank you," and he like, you know, he like does his thing. Um, but you know, speaking of Oscar Isaac and Mark, this is the first episode that's taken place majority wise from Mark's perspective instead of Steven. Um, and that was really cool, I think, because we learn, I mean, we've gotten little glimpses of Mark before, but in this episode we really kind of start to see like who Mark is as a character, what his personality is, how he treats people, how he talks to people, how he reacts to things, as opposed to just being like the guy who can put the Moon Knight suit on and save Steven's butt when need be. um what do I mean? Do you have any thoughts on that? There's that great scene in the car where he's talking to Layla, and she's like, you know, these secrets keep coming out about you every time. I think I know you, I don't know you, and he's just like, yeah, you don't, you don't know me. And that he just leaves it at that, and it's like
Yeah.
silence. And I was like, wow, all right.
I mean, yeah, he's definitely like. It's interesting because part of me almost wonders, like, they have that conversation, like, did he act differently before all this happened? Like, like, I don't know. But right now, he's like a dick. Like, he's
Yeah.
kind of classic, but he's like a dick because he knows what he needs to be doing. He needs to get it done. And obviously, he's got Contra in his ear, and it's very serious. But he kind of has like a little bit of there's a little sarcasm in there. The way he would interact with Mogart is kind of funny because Mogart was just like a little fancy, like invincible guy. He was trying to shake his hand.
Right.
But so he's definitely different than Stephen Grant, but I don't know if on his own he would be super interesting. And we haven't seen that much of him yet, to be fair. But I would be sad if Stephen was gone. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I'm even Steven's taking a I didn't mention at the top of the episode. I had been trying to do the all white for Moon Knight every time we recorded this, and then today I realized I only have so many white clothes. And I was gonna rewear the outfit, and then I was wearing this today, and I thought this is this is my ode to Stephen Grant. So today I've done 2 Moon Knight episodes. This is my Stephen Grant fit. I don't know. Maybe next week we're gonna get a Mark Spector fit on here, but we'll have, we'll have to wait and see. Um, yeah, no, I have a note on my little notepad about how uh we see in this is one of the first episodes where Mark and Steven are also like more accepting of working together as a team, and we see more of that classic Moon Knight, like the personalities coming together to make one like very capable individual. And we see that with Mark kind of taking over for the action sequences and the spy stuff, but then whenever they need the intellectual who knows all this stuff about the Egyptian um, culture and the Egyptian lore and all that, the religion, all that sort of stuff, you have Stephen come in, and together they have the brains and the brawn, which is really exciting. But Mary, but I know you're gonna want to talk about it. This episode has a really fun little bit in the beginning when they're hopping back and forth between Mark taking out some dudes and Steven not wanting him to, and it starts off with like a fun little reverse of the thing from the first episode where it's Mark blacking out and you assume that Steven takes over, and that's going for a little bit and it's all fun and games, and then boom, he flashes, he pops up, and a bunch of dudes are dead, and Mark didn't do it, or at least Mark doesn't remember doing it. And he's like, "Hey, Steven, this is weird and out of character. Why would you do that?" And Steven was like, "It wasn't me. You killed those guys." And then,
Funny because Mark wasn't even like this. Mark's like, Steven, what did you do?
yeah, no, I thought that he's like, "Steven, like, good lord, man."
Mr. Knight is going for it, or not even Mr. Knight, because they weren't in a suit at all, which maybe is part of it. But, well, yeah, and so that was, yeah. To me, when I first watched through the episodes, that was the first time, because I really wasn't thinking about it. I just assumed they weren't going to put Jake in. If they were, I don't see it later. But, like, that was the first time I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So who else could that be? I mean, they could make it a different third personality, I guess. Like,
But why would they do that?
yeah, a lot of people have really have this like Scotty theory because they like miscalled Stephen Scotty a few times in the first episode. I don't think that's it, but I'll mention
I
it.
haven't even heard that theory.
Yeah,
That would be weird. I feel like that's
yeah,
that classic like looking too much into stuff.
yeah. I don't know why they would mess with that. Like they need if they're gonna put it. But yeah, so I mean, okay, if neither of them did that, somebody did that. And if it's a third personality, it's a pretty brutal personality that fits Jake. Ooh, Jake. So, and I think the other thing I picked up a different time I watched it. So when Mark's on the roof the first time, fighting everyone, having a good time, it was before that blackout. He, I mean, he blacks out because Steven stops him from killing somebody, and then he gets in the taxi cab, and presumably Steven got him there. Anyway, but he comes back. But when he sees the people he had just fought and he wants to talk to them, and it's still Mark, he says, "That wasn't me up on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let me talk to you." Which is odd because he doesn't seem to know who, if there's even a third or who it is, but then he's telling people it wasn't him. So I don't know if that's just kind of a one-off quote that doesn't mean anything, but I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the cab thing. I got a good laugh out of imagining like how, because when Steven presumably takes over in that moment, Mark is holding a dangerous person who knows how to fight like by the neck with a knife, and then he's in a cab. So that means that presumably Steven had to have like found a way out of that situation where he like let the guy go and like started profusely apologizing in a British accent, and the guy, instead of trying to kill Steven, was like, all right, and like left. And I don't know, that's just a funny thought that I had. Speaking of the different personalities, though, there's a line in the beginning of this episode. I think it was in that opening sequence that I totally missed the first time, that I think is really huge in our understanding of like how he's been coexisting, or maybe how long or whatever. But Layla mentions that when Steven takes her to like the Steven apartment, that place is only 20 minutes from where her and Mark used to live.
Oh, I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, she it's like a very quick, she's like, yeah, and then he like takes me to this place that's like 20 minutes from
Yeah.
where we used to live or something. And I totally missed that the first time I watched the episode. I'm like, okay, so like Mark had to have known. Like he got a flat that was like in the same vicinity so that he could like, because I was trying to think like, how is every time he's switching to a new altar, he's like, is he going flying from country to country? Like, what's happening here? But that would make a lot of sense. I wanted to point that out because I completely missed it, and I wasn't sure if someone else missed it or if I was the only one or what was up with that. Um, Speaking of hosts, see me like flipping through my notes here. Um, another really good sequence in this episode is us finally seeing some of the other hosts from the other Egyptian gods around, and we see kind of what like an Egyptian god trial looks like, with Arthur Harrow and everything, and that whole sequence I found to be really interesting. Uh, just I wrote in my notes inside the Great Pyramid because I realized this time, on the rewatch, that the first episode opens with Stephen like talking to that little kid, and the little kid's like, there's nothing in there, and he's like, maybe not, but like who knows. And now he's actually in there, and it turns out there are a bunch of imprisoned Egyptian gods in there, uh which is nuts. But yeah, what were your thoughts on that whole sequence?
I have mixed thoughts on it. I mean, I think it's really interesting. I think like what we learn through it is really interesting, and I'm assuming if they're bringing all that in, that's gonna be a bigger part later on. I don't know. Again, it's hard to picture. There's just a lot going on already, so it's just really hard to picture like what could happen. But I think going into that history or mythology or whatever, it's really interesting. I really do think so. Um, it kind of just felt like it came out of nowhere, which I mean, a lot of this series kind of does. It's kind of just a weird show, but so that's where I'm kind of mixed on it. So I was just like watching it the first time, like, does this need to happen? And it really just kind of felt like it was a way for people to tell Mark he's crazy. No one's gonna
Right.
listen to him, and Harrow's just gonna keep being that classic like charismatic psychopath, and everyone's gonna be like, yeah. Although I don't know, he seemed extra chummy with Osiris. I don't know what it was, but there. I mean, he after they imprisoned Khonshu at the end. Spoilers of the same episode. They were like talking, and he let him like talk to the statue or whatever. But I don't know. There just seemed to be a little. They kind of seemed already set. I mean, they didn't like Khonshu to be fair, but there just seemed to
Yeah.
be an extra. But that's just me. Taking that.
Yeah, that whole sequence was interesting, to me. I don't know, I mean, I don't know. I thought it was cool, but I feel like I'm kind of easily pleased with that sort of stuff where I was just like, "Oh, this is neat," and we just like went in. Um but yeah, I mean, it was the Ennead, which they had talked about earlier in the show, so they had like kind of set it up by like previously explaining what that is and like who those gods are and everything. I thought it was interesting that they had, who was the goddess of like love and wine, or like music and
Loving
love and music.
for it.
Hathor. Hathor. I should have
That's
written
it.
it down.
Oh,
I did write it down.
you-
Hathor, music and love. Look at that. Yeah, so I thought it was interesting that they had her like supposedly she has like a history with Khonshu. We actually learned like a surprising amount about Khonshu in
Yeah.
this episode.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, we learned that he has, I don't know, potentially romantic relationship with Hathor. I don't know. Maybe they're just buds. Um, we learn, Arthur has that whole monologue that like ends the episode where he keeps talking about how Khonshu like tormented him and like did all these terrible things to him and like it was really everything that Khonshu did to him that has made him go on this quest for Amit and yada 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 yada. Um, and I wrote down the very direct note: "What the heck did Khonshu do to Harrow?" So, and like I feel like there's no way they don't reveal it down the line. But I'm curious to find out if Khonshu like was truly just awful, and now he's trying to atone for it a little bit with Mark in like his own weird way, or if Harrow's just has always been this kind of like terrible guy, and he just uses Khonshu as an excuse or somewhere in the middle or something.
But I have a very third path in theory on that.
I would love to hear it.
But I mean, I think the very like probably makes it most likely to happen. Very traditional thing is like, yeah, Hawk's the bad guy. He just has his own issues. Khonshu's probably flawed, but whatever. Mark's great. So, but and I'm gonna like take the L. Never used that phrase before. I'll take the L. Um,
You might as well start now
with,
on a video that a
yeah,
bunch of
yeah,
people are gonna watch.
yeah, 100%. And but I really do think Arthur Harrow is like a red herring, or at very best, just like a side villain. Like I think Khonshu is the big bad villain, and I think this actually added to my theory when I watched it again. Watching things again is great. Um, in the Lemire run, which is the popular run, everybody loves it. I love it, so I'm part of that. But in other runs too, Khonshu does his whole like he wants to break Mark down. There are times he's just like shit. Like he wants to break his mind completely so he can take over his body and like just be a human essentially, or have a human, just be like a flesh suit form, you know. And Harrow mentions that. He mentions that directly. He said something. If you hadn't completely broken me, I never would have learned the value of healing. And then, oh shit, that might be next episode. Never mind. But basically, that concept stays around. It's not nothing crazy, but like it's there enough that I'm wondering, okay, is that somehow what Khonshu is doing or wants to do to Mark? Maybe that's even
Right.
later Moon Knight story. But in my
Well,
mind, Khonshu's at some point the like main villain. Whether it's this series or later, he will be there.
that's very interesting. I can see that happening. I mean, Mark has been very like vocal throughout this whole show so far that he just can't wait to be freed from Khonshu. He doesn't want Layla to be the future avatar of Khonshu. Like he just wants to be broken free of everything. Um, I guess 2 points I'll take away from that because the second one's going to change the topic a little bit. So I'll start uh, with I wonder if he does turn out to be the bad guy and they have to like defeat Khonshu in some way or whatever. I wonder how they reconcile that with also keeping Moon Knight around for the future because what we know so far is that Mark only has Mark, Steven, all of them, they only have their abilities through Khonshu. And when Khonshu is imprisoned in the stone, they lose those superpowers. I mean, you watch as the stars are turning and everything, you watch him like slowly be drained and everything. Um, so that would be interesting if he turned out to be the bad guy, and then hypothetically would have to defeat him, or at least Mark would separate from him. Like, what does that mean for the future of Moon Knight? Um, that would be very very interesting. Uh, Second off, I wrote down too that Khonshu does do something surprisingly noble in this episode, which is when he willingly, in a really really cool visual moment, like turns back the stars. Steven
Mm-hmm.
puts on the Mr. Knight suit, which also looks really cool and kind of like helps him Um, and he does that with a slight bit of sorrow in his voice, and he does the whole tell Mark to free me, and then he does it. He gets put in stone, which apparently the best method the Egyptian gods have for imprisoning someone is putting them in a breakable statue,
Yeah.
which is my.
Man, I like and so if Amit's imprisoned, which they've said she is, I assume she's also got her own statue somewhere. Maybe not in
Yeah,
Giza, or Pharaoh would have been all over that. But yeah, what do they do when they get it? Do they just break it open?
and they
Like,
just break it.
um, but that's funny because in this episode, they at the end when they put them up or whatever on the shelf, old Khonshu, there's like a bunch of them. There's like they have imprisoned a lot of their kind into
Yeah.
statues. And they kind of a very ominous shot, like, okay, all these are gonna get broken. Like that's what I'm getting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did notice that there's like so many of those statues, and I had the thought of like, is it just the Ennead now? Like, have and that's like how many Egyptian gods could there possibly be left when they have like an entire Great Pyramid filled with imprisoned gods?
Yeah.
Like that's nuts.
Yeah.
Um,
I did.
yes.
Sorry. One thing that I thought
No,
was really
please,
interesting
please, please.
is during the trial, and Mark's crazy. Everybody be sad for the crazy guy. Like it wasn't great for Mark. But Harrow did say. I mean, he was deflecting the whole time, and they didn't really ask me any questions. But he did say he's like, Khonshu had me looking for Amit the whole time until we separated. So why was Khonshu doing that? And he said Khonshu's motivated by jealousy and paranoia. So one thing, Hero could be a liar. Yeah. Another thing, Khonshu have much more connection to finding Amit before just being stopping Hero part of it. So I find that interesting because I don't know what that would be. I honestly, that's not something I have a great theory for, but I think that's part of why I think there's just a lot more going on with Khonshu. And Hero might be red herring. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's it's funny watching it through twice. I'm still not even sure that like really registered with me. But now that you say it, I totally remember hearing it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, that is interesting, and that plays right into like the again that very ominous ending monologue, and he says like I'm going to finish what that like Star Warsy line, like I'm going to finish what you started, but like um yeah, look at you with these theories. So I never put that together. I was way too distracted by like all the other cool stuff going on in this episode. Um, yeah, I really like that whole sequence with the turning back the night sky.
I think that's really cool. Yeah.
Um,
That was a standout moment. That's one that I do remember. Like in the series as a whole, like pick what you remember. Like, that's easily one of them that I would think that is cool.
yeah. I visually I think it's such a treat. Like I don't know, it's so cool, and I thought it was interesting that they chose. I feel like there had to have been a discussion. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but there had to have been a discussion in like the at some production meeting where they were like, "We know this is gonna look really cool, and is it what suit does he wear? Is this Mr. Knight or is this Moon Knight?" Because on one hand, you have like the Moon Knight suit, which would look really cool next to Khonshu, like in the Egyptian sands, like doing the thing with his hands. But it does story wise make a lot more sense for it to be Steven, who, by the way, another quick topic change. The way the way Layla looks at Steven when he's doing his thing in this, I thought that was um, really interesting. And another thing that I think is really interesting is the concept of her. I think it's kind of a weird, touchy thing. The idea of him having like these different alters, and then which are essentially different personalities and different people, but also kind of the same person, and her maybe like not having the feelings for Mark that she used to have because he lied to her and he like she doesn't know who he is. But then Steven seems so like honest and earnest and sweet, and he's just like, I know a lot about the stars and I think you're pretty, and she's just like, oh okay, yeah, like I can dig that, and like it just like it just goes. I don't know, like I almost don't want to comment on it because I feel like I don't have an opinion that's gonna be valuable in any way or like all that informed. But yeah, I don't know. It feels like they might be going down that road. It just feels sort of like in the same territory as Loki falling in love with himself and it being like a weird romantic situation.
That's so different though.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
it's different than that
yeah,
for sure. But it's just in the same like
and it's
it's
just like,
interesting that they would like play with this.
yeah. Well, I wonder. I think I don't know if we wrote about it, but like like site wrote about it, but like I read articles that are like they're teasing a love triangle between the characters. So like they are like kind of going that route at least, and like you said, they clearly have really obvious like chemistry that they're playing at. So assuming if they do, which I don't, again, how much time do they have to?
Yeah, I mean right now all we have is like a longing stare for like a hot second, but
Yeah. I I would just be more interested in how they would handle. I because the comics
right, I was gonna ask you about
they're
that.
all over the place. They're all over the place. Marlene, so the lame Layla, the comics Layla.
Lame
She,
Layla.
yeah, she mostly just kind of is always dating all of them. And I mean, half the time he's just like always Mark. Like some of the comic runs just kind of forget about that part of them. So like but usually if he comes home with Steven or whatever, she's happy to kiss Steven hello if it's Mark or whatever shake. Um, It's usually I haven't seen it too many times where it's like a oh no I'm with Mark not used to it like so I think the comics are not great in that regard so I'd be curious if the show went into it no clue if they do but if they would address it as okay she's actually falling for this other person Steven instead of
Mhm.
rather than like trying to group it in, which I think is odd. It's not a concept. I don't personally understand it. But yeah, that'd be interesting. But I agree. I mean, longing stares go a long way in TV shows.
Yeah. Especially TV shows that are only 6 episodes, and they're like anything is character development. So we're gonna go with it. Um, is there anything else that you specifically wanted to talk about in this episode? We kind of hit all of like the main pressure points of it. But I those based on my notes. So
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I was going to say to your point of if they defeated Khonshu or whatever, like distance himself from Khonshu, what would Moon Knight look like? That's part of why I'm somewhat confident in my theory. That I will get embarrassed for later, but um, because in the comics he mostly does not have superpowers. I mean, this whole like concept at one random point in time he had the powers that kind of went with the phases of the moon, like full moon strongest, like cool.
right
That was like one time. A lot of people bring that up, but I was like, eh.
for
But
the gimmicky,
yeah, otherwise, just like nothing. Like that's the thing. He's like, it's why part of why he's a Batman comparison. Like he's like,
right?
but um, but in this show, yeah, I mean, it's they.
In this, he's literally getting impaled and just like getting up.
What is
Yeah.
that?
But that magical armor that seems to be
They
not
don't
like literal
explain the
armor.
armor at
Yeah.
all. They're just
He just takes bullets and like and it's not his cape because you can I noticed on the rewatch the first time I watched it when he's protecting Layla from the gunshots, I thought that the cape was like bulletproof. But this time I looked and the bullets go through the cape. He's just taking them like into his body. Like you can see the little like
I know
holes go through the cape and then just like
shove him back around afterwards because she was like, buy me some time. It's like I can do that, and then he
right. Well,
screws them all back. So I
Well, that's
assume
the same
like,
thing though. Is that like when he gets impaled, and then it's not like he has big holes in his suit. Like he just takes it off and he's fine.
that's just and that's I have so many. I don't know if they're problems. I know the show is short and they're doing a lot, and I love the character work, so I'm like really happy. But with some of the Contra Moon Knight stuff, they don't explain it. And it's
No,
like, okay, they're kind
it's
of
magic.
over time. But right, and like I think Khonshu refers to his suit as a healing suit after the impalement. So it's like a little bit okay, but it's like, yeah, how does the suit even like, let alone being summoned? Like, how is it? Is it bulletproof? Is it this? Like, I don't know. Is he stronger? I like it, but you know, is he better at fighting because of it? I don't think so, because Steven still sucks. But
Yeah.
um,
If he wouldn't be
like,
better at fighting because of it, because then Steven would be. I mean, we did see that quick shot, like when Steven punched the um jackal thing in the last episode. So like I guess it probably ups his strength a little bit.
yeah, he like ripped a bumper or whatever off of.
Yeah, so I guess it just seems to be like he goes into like Khonshu mode. So he looks the part. And
Yeah.
then the magic of the suit seems to be that it's not like literal armor, even though it also looks like literal armor. It's like a magic thing. Like that's all I can picture. And I noticed like when he takes, because he throws his logo, right? Which is a cool detail, and I think it's a cool detail. But I noticed that when he like takes it off of his chest, he doesn't remove the logo. Like it just morphs off of his body, and the logo is still there. And then
Yeah,
he throws it. So it's like
it's
I don't
insane.
know.
Just
Yeah,
like,
it's just like no, literally, it's like a magic like infinite thing.
yeah, well, part of my point was is because I think in the like if they planned on at the end of the series, let's say Conchi's the bad guy, who knows, and they did himself, and they
Who's
don't
to
have
say?
those suits, it doesn't matter that we didn't fucking know what they were because he can go
Yeah,
and make himself just that bright white classic color look that I mean the comics seem to have. I mean, because also in the comics, when he says goodbye to Contra, which he does frequently, and Contra always comes back, like they're good friends, but he still wants to be the crime fighter. Like that's still just like in his blood, more or less. Like it seems
right.
like, and especially once he'd been doing it for a while, which is a little different in the series. It's just been Mark for who knows how long. Um, they just kind of kept doing it. So I think that's where it's going. That's just my theory. It's probably wrong.
I will say that if they do go that route, it's gonna make his costume changes like way harder. Especially if they keep doing that like Steven is Mr. Knight. That's gonna be such a pain in his butt. Like every time he switches, he has to like go like put on the three-piece suit with like gloves and the mask. His eyes don't glow anymore. And then eventually, when he's in Midnight Suns, and they're like, like we have to fight this demon, he's gonna be like, I really miss when I had like supernatural abilities, and now I'm like, why am I still playing this game? I should be going home. Like,
Yeah, but I
um,
mean, it's kind of built up. To be fair, and this is against my theory, they haven't built Mark or Moon Knight or Mister Knight now up to be like any particular kind of hero. Like he's punched the
no,
people that we've seen in like in theory, he's probably done something in the past, but like he's not this established.
right.
So for to unestablish him more almost at the end with my theory doesn't make sense. But
Well,
I'm being fair.
there could be some middle ground that we're just not thinking of, because I feel like your theory makes sense to me. I just don't know how they would. But then, I mean, I think that we should also take into consideration. I mean, we know we wrote up like an article on it, and he said it in an interview and yada yada yada. Like we know that Oscar Isaac somehow managed to like he's only signed up for this. Like they created Moon Knight supposedly. I mean, we don't know. It could be people have lied about this stuff before in interviews. But supposedly they created Moon Knight as this like very individual, like 6 episode limited series. So it is possible that they end it in a way where he might not come back, and that like he just stops being Moon Knight and like becomes free of it. I mean, it seems unlikely because of the nature of the MCU and Oscar Isaac being like, yeah, I'd love to come back and be in the Midnight Suns and like yada yada. But I mean, we don't know. They could leave it ambiguous, and it could just be like another writer's problem in the future. Uh, but yeah, I mean, and like you said, Mark Spector and Moon Knight, they're not established. I mean, we know that some form of Moon Knight has probably been around for like a really long time, like like an Iron Fist Ancient One situation where it's just like you know however long Khonshu's been around, I guess, or however long they've been doing this Avatar thing, there's been a Moon Knight. I did really like that line where they talk about like we tolerate your like flashy, but like hypothetically any of the gods' avatars could be like a superhero on Earth, and Khonshu was like the only one who's like, nah, I'm gonna make my guy look really cool.
But the other gods did say, or they implied, or Osiris implied, he's the main one talking, and Khonshu yelled at him for it, that they were all just there to observe. And Khonshu
Right.
was the only one who wanted to interfere, aka like do things on Earth through the mark.
Yeah.
So
And
I think
Khonshu's
that's also there's something
yeah.
bigger going on there that I don't think.
Khonshu's messy and he likes
Yeah.
drama, and that's why we appreciate him.
Yeah. So that's that's interesting too, because so yeah, Mark's not an observer per se. He
Yeah.
doesn't like either.
Yeah. Um Yeah, no, that I mean, yeah, I mean, hypothetically speaking, like in 2012, while the Avengers were saving New York, Ethan Hawke was somewhere just like beating the crap out of someone in a Moon Knight suit.
It's still the same cut on a different roof. Is
Yeah,
Ethan?
Ethan Hawke in the Moon Knight suit. You got like the ancient one over here, and then Ethan Hawke's Moon Knight. It just like doesn't. um, Yeah, no, it's we're gonna see how all this pans out. I really want you to be right, just because I want to record the episode after the finale where we come on and you're like in victory mode and every theory you've had turned out to be correct, and we're just like, listen, if that happens, we gotta like have like champagne on the final recording episode or something. It's just like a big celebration.
Yeah, I'd sell for damn. I really sell that. Yeah, it's like the first time I've had like theories I really care about. So.
And they all like they're all pretty solid. I think at least one of the theories you presented will come true. I have faith in you.
Oh, they're all like really based in what I've seen in the comics and how they could fit in.
Right.
I would like them to almost, because I think Khonshu
Right.
is he's Khonshu, but I think in this situation it would be cool because we don't see him a lot and he's just kind of like around and he's talking. So if like the last few episodes he just kind of like flips a switch and is like, I'm here now. Yeah, get
Yeah.
ready. That'd be kind of cool. But
It's gonna go one of two ways. I feel like he's not just gonna be there. Like they're setting it up where Kachu is in the last episode. He's either going to be the big bad or he's going to be like the saving grace who turns out to be like a really good guy who just was misunderstood or something. Like it's gonna be one of the two. They made a really big deal about him being like the one god who thinks like they should interfere with humanity and yada yada yada. So I don't know. We will see how all of that plays out. Um, in the meantime, is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for watching and or listening, everybody at home. Um, we will be back next week to break down episode 4 of Moon Knight, which I'm really excited to talk about when it happens. In the meantime, I have been Hunter. This has been
Mary.
yes, 2 for 2. Everybody, that's oh man. All right. See you, everybody.